Hey, Tiffany. I waved as I pulled up next to her as she hopped out of her car. I parked quickly and met her.
Hey, Sonia. Another week working at the mall. I will never understand why you'd want to do this. You're rich.
I laughed. There's more to life than being rich. I nudged her playfully. And besides, my parents are rich. I just enjoy helping people, and I want to make something of myself. By myself, you know? At this point, I didn't realize that a change of events was about to shift my entire life. Want to know what they are? Keep watching.
Hey, mystery guy alert.
Tiffany winked at me as she attended to a customer. Every Saturday, a cute guy walked into the store and looked around, but would never buy anything. However, today, he approached me.
Hi.
His dazzling blue eyes looked into mine. He scratched his head nervously. Hi, how can I help you? I smiled politely.
I know you don't know me, but...
He cleared his throat and spoke quickly.
Can I take you to the movies sometime?
Sure, why not? He told me his name was Dante and we exchanged numbers. Over the next few weeks, we spoke every day. He was funny and really easygoing. Eventually, we did go to the movies on a date. After the movies, we went on other dates. And after 3 months, we were officially a couple. One evening, as we watched a movie, I turned to Dante and asked, "What type of pizza should we bring to Tiffany's this weekend?"
Huh?
Dante looked at me confused. Saturday. Tiffany asked us to come over to watch a movie this weekend, and we said we'd bring a pizza.
Oh yeah, how about Hawaiian and pepperoni?
Sounds good. But this wasn't the only incident where I spoke with Dante and he seemed clueless. One time he forgot we made reservations for dinner. Another time he forgot Tiffany's name. But the final straw for me was when he ordered caramel popcorn with nuts at the movies when he knew that I was allergic to nuts. When we got back to the car after the movie, I turned to him. Dante, what's going on with you? I feel as though you're two different people sometimes. Dante lowered his eyes.
I'm so sorry, Sonia. I knew I should have told you sooner, but I was kind of embarrassed and I didn't want you to think I was a freak.
I held his hand. Why would I think you're a freak? Dante sighed heavily.
When I was 7 years old, I got into a car accident and I hit my head. Dad said I had amnesia for about 2 months before everything came back. Everyone thought I'd make a full recovery, but shortly after I regained my memory, some of my short-term memory gained gaps. So basically, sometimes I'd forget and other times I won't. I'd understand if you want to break things off and never want to speak with me again.
Dante, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I pulled him close and kissed him. You're the only one I want. Dante smiled.
How about we go to my house for a bit before I drop you off?
I nodded. I had never been to Dante's house before. When we pulled up to the front gate, my eyes widened. The house was gorgeous. It looked like something from a Rich and Famous magazine. This is beautiful, I said as we drove up to the house. Once settled with a glass of wine, I asked, "So tell me about your family."
I'm not really close with my family. After Mom passed, we grew apart.
I squeezed his hand. I'm so sorry. Don't worry. Things usually work themselves out. Dante quickly changed the subject. We hung out for a few hours before he dropped me home. While at the mall, looking for an anniversary gift for my parents one afternoon, I saw Dante and was about to approach him when the guy he was talking to spun around. But then I felt my jaw drop. The guy looked exactly like Dante. I tilted my head. 2 of them? How? When Dante turned, I hid between the clothes racks outside a clothing store until Dante and the other guy walked away. I ran all the way to my car. After I cried a few minutes in my car, it dawned on me. That was probably why Dante didn't remember everything, because there were 2 of them. I mean, who does that? My sadness quickly turned to anger. If the guys want to play games, then play games we must. I turned on the engine and drove out of the mall parking lot. I went along with the twin charade. Over time, I was able to figure out which twin was which. I called them Dante 1 and Dante 2. Dante 1 had a small mole right above his eyebrow, and Dante 2 didn't. My plan to use them was only supposed to be for a few months, then I would tell them that I knew what they were up to. However, I realized after 3 months that Dante 1 was the only twin that came to meet me. Eventually, my revenge slipped away and I fell in love with Dante. I can't help who I fall in love with, can I? After 1 year, Dante 1 asked me to marry him, and I agreed. About 2 weeks before the wedding, I overheard Dante 1 on the phone, and my blood ran cold.
Listen, Chuck, once I marry this chick, I'll have all the money that I need.
I decided to hire a private investigator to dig up all the dirt on Dante 1 and his family. First off, Dante 1's name was Alexandro, and his brother's name was Aiden. They made money by swindling rich women. Mr. Finley, their father, lost his company about 7 years ago. Around the same time their mother got sick. Within a year, she passed away, and the boys blamed their father since he couldn't afford proper health care for her and abandoned him. Once their father re-established himself, the brothers tried to re-enter his life, but he cut them off completely and removed them from his will. Dante, too, was recently widowed. After 6 months of marriage, his wife passed away in her sleep. The family of the woman thought foul play was involved, but they could never prove it. Since then, Dante 2 had been married 4 more times, and Dante 1 was married 3 times before. All wives died the same. But, with their gambling addiction, the money was never enough. I knew it was time to end the charade. "Thanks for coming with me to tell Dante the wedding is off," I said, as I turned the key and walked into Dante's house.
I'd have it no other way. I'm ready for this.
Tiffany pulled out the rolling pin from her purse. Tiffany followed me to Dante's office. I pushed open the door and stepped into the office. Tiffany and I froze. There stood Dante 1 and Dante 2. Before I realized what was happening, Dante 1 and Dante 2 overpowered Tiffany and I. The last thing I remembered was Tiffany slumped to the ground before I was knocked unconscious. When I woke up, Tiffany and I were on a boat, bound and gagged.
Grab her legs!
Aiden nodded to Alexandro. I looked on in horror as Tiffany wiggled and squirmed as they picked her up and tossed her overboard. "No!" I screamed through my gag. Tears rolled down my face. Tiffany was dead and it was my fault.
What's the plan for this one?
Aiden kicked me as Alexandro started the engine of the boat.
We have to stick to the plan. Chuck wants his money.
Once we docked, I was blindfolded and taken to another location. When the blindfold was removed, I was in a dungeon-like room that smelled horrid. There was a hole in the ground for a toilet and a small bench on the corner. I was shackled. Alexandro told me to call my parents and tell them that we were going to elope, and I needed to sound happy. That was the hardest 2 minutes of my life. I didn't know if after that phone call I'd ever see or hear my parents' voices again. My parents gave us their blessing, and I told them I'd be off the grid for the next 3 months, and they shouldn't worry about me. I promised them that they would hear from me as soon as I returned. Alexandro threatened me to put on a wedding dress, and pictures were posted on my social media page. After Aiden forged our marriage certificate, a month later they faked my death. They said I died in a boating accident after Alexandro and I took a private cruise ship to a remote island. Alexandro, because he was my husband, got all my assets. After 6 months of being a prisoner, I was able to escape after Aiden accidentally left my dungeon door unlocked. It took me 3 days before I arrived at my parents' house.
Sonia?
Mom screamed as she hugged me and brought me inside. Dad ran into the room.
Margaret, what did you say?
He looked at Mom before he realized I was in the room. My parents took me to a private doctor who ran some tests on me. They never revealed to the doctor my true identity. The doctor recommended that I get some rest and placed me on a strict diet until I was able to consume foods as I should. About 2 weeks after my escape, my parents paid not only for me to have plastic surgery, but they also had a full makeover. We also legally changed our names. They knew that the twins were probably still looking for me, and they weren't about to lose me twice. After we healed from the plastic surgery, we moved to another country and hoped to start a new life. But what do you do when you try to start a new life? But your old life comes back to haunt you. While shopping at a store, I saw Tiffany assisting a customer. Yes, you heard right. How could this even be possible? I couldn't let this pass up. I hired a young lady, Amanda, to befriend Tiffany. I told her what to say and how to act. We also changed her name to Stephanie. Once Amanda built a relationship with Tiffany, I told her to invite her to the club. We wired Amanda and sent 2 private security guards to look after her, just in case something went wrong. While at the club, Alexandro and Aiden showed up.
Hey, Stephanie. I'd like you to meet my 2 brothers, Aiden and Alexandro.
My jaw dropped. Her brothers? Tiffany explained that her father had an affair with his secretary who died during childbirth. But unlike her brothers, she took her mother's last name, not her father's. Further into the night, I found out that I was a target the first week Tiffany met me at the mall, and I played right into her hand. I hired a private investigator to follow Mr. Finley for about 2 weeks before I made my move. Mr. Finley was an older, handsome version of his sons. I knew I had to play this carefully to pull this off. Did I feel bad for involving Mr. Finley in this mess? Maybe just a little, but that didn't stop me from doing it. On Friday afternoons, Mr. Finley visited art galleries. I made sure that I was at the last art gallery he visited that afternoon. I walked up to him as he stared at one of the photos. "Have you figured out what it is yet?" Mr. Finley smiled at me.
Not yet. Do you have any ideas?
He smiled. "It looks like a giraffe I drew when I was 5. And when I asked Mom what it was, she told me it was a dog." Mr. Finley laughed heartily. We moved from picture to picture, and by the end of the night, we were having a late-night drink at Mariano's, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. It wasn't long before I won over Mr. Finley's heart, or should I say, Giovanni. After 3 months, Giovanni and I eloped. One lesson I learned from before: always have backup and cameras. Without telling Giovanni, I placed tiny cameras around the house, and I paid a company to keep tabs on my stepchildren. I got word that they planned to kidnap me. On the night of the kidnapping, I noticed when they entered the house, and I pressed my alarm, which alerted the police. I sat in the office and waited for them to barge in. "What do you want?" I raised my hands in the air. Alexandro, Aiden, and Tiffany all wore black masks and black clothing.
We just want to kidnap you for a few days. Your husband will pay a hefty sum to return you unharmed,
Tiffany said.
Let's just grab her and get her out of here.
Alexandro said impatiently. Tiffany walked behind the table and grabbed my arms while Aiden kept the gun on me. Just then, the office door opened. It was Giovanni.
What in the world is going on here?
Giovanni looked around the room.
Sir, stay right there.
Aiden tried to disguise his voice.
Aiden, is that you?
Giovanni grabbed the mask off the person closest to him. It was Alexandro. Distracted, I slapped the gun from Aiden's hand and it fell to the floor. Tiffany, Aiden, and I scrambled to retrieve the gun. In the scuffle, the gun went off twice. Everyone froze. Giovanni groaned and his knees buckled. While Alexandro held his side, we all looked at where the shot came from. Tiffany pulled off her mask. Her eyes were wide with fear as she dropped the gun from her hand. Tiffany and I ran to Giovanni's side while Aiden ran to aid his brother.
Tiffany, we have to go.
Aiden tried to grab Tiffany's hand as he supported Alexandro with his other arm.
Dad!
Tiffany screamed.
Fine.
Aiden retorted and left the room with Alexandro. A few seconds after they left the room, I heard sirens and police officers barge into the room. Giovanni was rushed to the hospital, and Tiffany was placed in handcuffs. The police questioned me at the hospital while Giovanni was in surgery. So, how did my story end? Giovanni died, and I now have a net worth of $100 million. Tiffany, Aiden, and Alexandro spent consecutive life sentences in prison for breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, attempted murder, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. After Giovanni's death, I opened a foundation in remembrance of him to help people who needed financial assistance. It's not a fairy tale ending. However, it was the ending that I deserved.